Hey everybody, I'm Zac.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth
on Now You Know. We're brought to you by abetterrouteplanner.com. Use our link in the show notes below to get a 30-day free trial to the premium app.
And we're sponsored by BigBattery.com with the best battery prices in the USA guaranteed. If you've got something you need to power, from homes to cars, RVs to boats, and much more, BigBattery.com has you covered, offering the newest battery tech. Use the code NOWYOUKNOW to save 5% off your purchase today at BigBattery.com.
And we're sponsored by EcoWare.us. They carbon offset the production, the shipping, and the life cycle of every product, and they plant 10 trees for every order to try and make it as carbon negative a purchase as possible.
All right, so on last week's Tesla Q1 earnings call, Tesla's VP of Vehicle Engineering, Lars Moravy, gave us an update on the deadly accident in Texas involving a Tesla Model S.
Now, Zac and I listened to it and took notes for our in-depth on the earnings call, which came out the next day. Now, Moravy's explanation was kind of hard to follow, and Zac and I were both confused by some of the things he said, and we said so.
They talked about the fact that it only accelerated to 30 miles an hour?
I think that we must have misheard that. That was definitely not true.
But what did the mass media do?
They just made up a story that fit the narrative they wanted to hear. So here are some CNN and CBS articles from Wednesday.
So what did Lars Moravy say?
Well, let's start with Elon in the earnings call itself.
There was an article regarding a tragedy where there was a high-speed accident in Tesla, and there was really just extremely deceptive media practices where it was claimed to be autopilot, where this is completely false. And those journalists should be ashamed of themselves.
Okay, so Elon is very clear here. Autopilot was not involved in the crash.
Now we go to Lars.
Yeah, thanks, Elon. So I was just saying we're committed to safety in all our designs, and that's number one in what we do here. Regarding the crash in Houston specifically, we work directly with the local authorities, NTSB and NHTSA, wherever applicable, and whenever they reach out to us for help, directly on the engineering level and whatever else we can support. In that vein, we did a study with them over the past week to understand what happened in that particular crash, and what we've learned from that effort was that AutoSteer did not and could not engage on the road condition that as it was designed. Our adaptive cruise control only engaged when a driver was buckled and above 5 miles per hour, and it only accelerated to 30 miles per hour over the distance before the car crashed. As well, adaptive cruise control disengaged the car slowly to complete to a stop when the driver's seatbelt was unbuckled. Through further investigation of the vehicle and accident remains, we inspected the car with NTSB and NHTSA and the local police, and were able to find that the steering wheel was indeed deformed, so leading to the likelihood that someone was in the driver's seat at the time of the crash, and all seatbelts post-crash were found to be unbuckled. We were unable to recover the data from the SD card at the time of impact, but the local authorities are working on doing that, and we await their report. As I said, we continue to hold safety in a high regard and look to improve our products in the future through this kind of data and other information from the field.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there.
And it's understandable if on the first listen, it sounded like Lars said that the car was in autopilot and then it crashed going no more than 30 miles an hour.
The problem is that Lars didn't slow down and clearly state that they were working with authorities using a second Tesla test car, and that in those tests, the test car was the one that in AP wouldn't go more than 30 miles an hour.
So in order to make sure that we understood what they were talking about, we tried to do as close to the test that they're talking about using our vehicles. So, we don't own a Model S. We tested in my Model 3. But we wanted to see, what they were talking about, and we gained a lot of understanding. We're going to hopefully explain it all to you. But here's where I want to stop and talk about Tesla's weakness. It seems to always be their weakness.
Yeah, the narrative, the telling of the story, whether it's explaining this crash or the Model 3 ramp.
Or taking the company private, or a myriad of other times when Tesla has to explain to the public some very detailed thing. Tesla, Elon, thinks that a short tweet or a very hard to follow explanation like this one from Lars is the way to tell the public.
Now, don't get us wrong. I mean, we don't like many PR departments. We have to work with them all the time, and they often give you a very glossy, dumbed-down story.
And I know that us Tesla fans are not the typical dumb public, But
when you don't have a PR department, then you have to take on that responsibility of being the PR department. And when you don't, and you put out confusing narratives, you get this.
that is Texas Representative Kevin Brady. He read some local news online, which said that at least one Tesla autopilot feature was active during the Texas crash, and now he wants some answers.
And, you know, good for him. I know this is going to sound weird coming from me, but like, if that's the information he had, he should want some answers.
That's exactly how I would want my representative to react given that information. And Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. My representative, that's what I'd want him to do if that's the information that we all kind of have. The problem is he has the wrong information.
So here's the thing, Elon. I know you hate glossy press departments that put out meaningless press releases, but a press department also takes journalists' calls. If Tesla had a PR department, then after this earnings call, they could have fielded calls from Matt McFarland from CNN and told him that what he thought he heard wasn't correct.
And they could have gotten him a corrected statement that was accurate. And I know that you don't think this way, Elon.
This is how you think. This is a tweet from YouTuber Warren Redlich, who we like. And so basically, let's walk through this tweet, right? He's saying, Tesla with a PR team, an event happens, media misreports the event, Tesla responds, and the media misreports Tesla's response. If Tesla has no PR team, then an event happens, the media misreports the event the same way, no Tesla response this time, story dies. Elon says, exactly, laughy face. Problem is, both Warren and Elon are missing the point.
A crappy PR department might do this. They might allow the press to still get the story wrong, but a good press department goes out in front of a story and helps ensure that most media outlets will get the story right.
Now, we know about Matt McFarland of CNN. He's interviewed us before. He's not a FUD reporter, in my opinion, but he is new to the Tesla world, and he appreciates it when people take the time to explain things to him, like all good reporters do.
If Tesla had a good press department, I'm pretty confident they could have kept at least CNN's reporting from coming out wrong, which then could have kept the false narrative from reaching Representative Kevin Brady, and so on.
If we want to have things like self-driving cars, then we have to be vigilant about getting accurate and understandable news out to the public. Will a press department solve everything? No. But a good press department is a start.
Because when a reporter like Matt McFarland goes to his editors and he says, okay, so I have a couple different bents on this story. One is that it was a very unclear earnings call, and you could take it that the Tesla was in autopilot when it got into the crash. And the editors go, well, does Tesla have a response to this? And he goes, no. And they go, well, great, because that's a great headline. We should run that story because we can get off scotch-free. We can say, well, Tesla didn't respond. We didn't have to, there was no press department for us to reach out to. On the other hand, in the parallel universe where Matt McFarland goes to his editors and he says, hey, I want to run this story. There are a couple different bents to it. It's very confusing. And they go, well, have you contacted Tesla? And he says, yes. And here's what they said. And they said, well, we're probably going to need to change the headline a bit, and you're going to definitely need to put Tesla's response in there to be a good journalist. And he would go, okay, that's fine. And the story would have been different.
Exactly. But in the absence of nothing, you listen to what's there. And so when there's crickets from Tesla, then you go with the story you have.
And I want to really emphasize that most PR departments suck. They are like the last thing that most companies think about. So they hire these, buffoons who just are like, oh, you want us to run a press release about that thing that you're working on? It's like, yeah, sure, go do that, whatever. And for most companies, it's fine because you're doing something that's pretty boring, generic. Oh, we make a little widget.
Well, I want to kind of flip this around. Most companies need a press department because they need press. Tesla doesn't need press, right, really, but what they need to do is control the story. And by control, I don't mean lie. I mean get an accurate story out there that people understand. And here's the problem. You're watching this, folks. You're probably really smart and you're really into Tesla. And you're the kind of person who, when Battery Day comes out, which is Tesla's press event, you'll pour through all our videos and articles to find out what they were talking about. What do you think the average person does after Battery Day? They might read an article, or they might look at a headline that says, Battery Day, a failure. Battery Day, a flop. Or whatever.
Battery Day, confusing. We don't know what the heck they were talking about. New battery, don't know.
Right. Okay, that's what their takeaway is.
And what happened after Battery Day? It was an amazing event. We learned so many amazing things and saw how far ahead Tesla was. And yet, what did the stock do? Stock dropped.
Right.
This earnings call, record quarter for Tesla. After the earnings call, what happened? Stock dropped. Why? Why is this because They don't have a PR department. The earnings call, everyone calls it a snooze fest,
Right.
which is understandable because it's hard to listen to. The audio sucks so much. When we were showing you what Lars said, it's really hard to listen to. Bad audio is the worst. That's why we have these things in front of us. If we didn't have to have these things, if we could just use the camera's audio over there, it would sound much, much worse. But hey, we wouldn't have this in front of us.
Right.
A PR department could say, Elon, when you do the earnings call, we've bought you a microphone. It cost $35 as opposed to using the crappy one on your laptop or on your iPhone.
Right.
And you're going to sound just that little bit much better. And hey, everyone else who's going to be on the earnings call, we're going to have prepped our response to this. And Lars, you're really a brilliant guy, but you're not the person who's going to say it. We're going to go to someone who can speak, like Drew Baglino. He's going to be the one who has a written statement that he reads
Or
off.
Lars should have had a written statement that he read off.
Something like that. But there's no one at Tesla there to do that. So which means that the press can have a field day because A, it's a little confusing and they don't have any responsibility to Tesla to do anything because there's no PR department.
Right. So here's a breakdown of what Lars said during the earnings call and why a PR department is needed. And we're going to give his clips, and then we're going to talk about what he talked about and show you there's 7 points here, and they're all pretty complicated, and he went through it in like a minute and a half. Right. And so it's understandable that most of the press misreported it. So number one, we worked with the authorities and did a study using a second Tesla test car. But that's not what he said.
Regarding the crash in Houston specifically, we work directly with the local authorities, NTSB and NHTSA, wherever applicable, and whenever they reach out to us for help, directly on the engineering level and whatever else we can support.
So that's confusing. Okay, I kind of get the gist of it, but not quite. We had to listen to it. We're so super smart. We had to listen to it multiple times in order to understand what he's talking about.
All right, so number two. In our test, adaptive cruise control would only engage when a driver was sitting in the driver's seat and was buckled and going above 5 miles an hour. What did he say, though?
In that vein, we did a study with them over the past week to understand what happened in that particular crash. And what we've learned from that effort was that auto steer did not and could not engage on the road condition that as it was designed. Our adaptive cruise control only engaged when a driver was buckled and above 5 miles per hour.
Even what we said takes some thinking about.
Right.
Adaptive cruise control, which is not full self-driving, which is not autopilot or auto steer. Adaptive cruise control is just cruise control that can see cars ahead of it and slow down. That's it. We did a test to make sure that I knew exactly what he was talking about. And he's right. When you're driving on a road with no lines, you can put it in adaptive cruise control. It's a very nice feature. But you can't put it into adaptive cruise control unless you're going above 5 miles an hour. Once you drop below 5 miles an hour, that option goes away for you.
Right. So if you're thinking that you can stop the car and then put it into adaptive, you can't.
Right. So you'd have to go to the nth degree like we saw with Consumer Reports if you wanted to do anything like this at all. But again, I don't think that it would work.
Right. Number three. Our test car only accelerated to 30 miles an hour. But this is what Lars said.
And it only accelerated to 30 miles per hour over the distance before the car crashed.
All right, so we weren't sure what Lars meant here. Did he mean that the test car in that distance between the start point and the tree could only accelerate to 30 miles an hour even though the driver tried to make it go faster? Or did he mean that the car maxes out at 30 miles an hour? So we decided to test it ourselves. What did we find out?
So what we did was we measured the distance on Google Maps, approximately, of the distance between the end of the cul-de-sac and the curve where the car went off the road and crashed. It's about 315 feet. So we measured that out ourselves. We placed some cones. Then I got in the car. I got started. I put it into adaptive cruise control. Again, important, adaptive cruise control. And I set the speed to as fast as I could possibly go. Over the span of 315 feet, the car only accelerated to about 30 miles an hour. Now, important to point out, the car would have continued going to whatever speed I set it to because it's adaptive cruise control, and you are responsible for driving the car when it's in adaptive cruise control.
But what this shows is that that's probably not what happened, because if they had hit the tree going 30 miles an hour, then not everyone would have died. It would have just been a little boop. The car would have had some damage, but everyone would have gotten out alive.
Which means that it was impossible for the car to get into auto steer, to get into autopilot. So that throws that argument out the window. Then if you were to say, oh, maybe it was the adaptive cruise control. First of all, it wouldn't have been able to accelerate to that speed, which means that it probably wasn't that. Also, it would have been very hard for no one in the front seat to activate adaptive cruise control because you need to have someone in the front seat and you need to be going over 5 miles an hour, which is really hard to do if you're sitting in the passenger seat to enable something to do that. You'd have to do some crazy Consumer Reports thing where you'd have to like put your foot across the console and hit the accelerator. No one in their right mind would think that this is the magic way to enable, magical self-driving features. So that's highly unlikely.
So then we decided to test what we think is more likely to have happened, which is that the driver of the car in that 315 feet accelerated quickly. And what did you find? Now, this isn't the same car. They had a Tesla Model S, which actually accelerates faster than our car. But what did we find?
I was able to get up to about 50-ish miles an hour at the end of the 315-ish feet. A Model S could do a lot faster in that span of time. And with an inexperienced driver who either tried to hit the brake and accidentally hit the accelerator again, or who didn't steer out of the way, or maybe they thought that the car was driving themselves, but someone was most probably sitting in the driver's seat.
Right. All right. So number 4 of what Lars said is that adaptive cruise control slowly brought the test car to a stop when the driver's seat belt was unbuckled. So again, we're talking about this second car that Tesla tested with authorities, not the car in Texas. Here's what Lars said.
As well, adaptive cruise control disengaged the car slowly to complete to a stop when the driver's seatbelt was unbuckled.
Okay, so that's a bit confusing because, again, like we said, was that the car that got into the crash or was that this car?
Right. He's talking about the test car, although I don't think he made that quite clear. But we decided to test this ourselves.
So I had it in adaptive cruise control. I unbuckled my seatbelt, and it actually, I was surprised. I thought it would slam on the brakes. It didn't. It slowed down very predictably, which is a nice safety feature because if you were a car behind it, the car simply came to a gentle, predictable stop, which we will bring up in point 6.
All right, number 5, he said steering wheel was deformed, so likely there was a driver in the driver's seat at the time of the crash. Here's what Lars said.
Through further investigation of the vehicle and accident remains, we inspected the car with NTSB and NHTSA and the local police, and were able to find that the steering wheel was indeed deformed, so leading to the likelihood that someone was in the driver's seat at the time of the crash.
So now he's just switched back from talking about the test car to talking about the car that was actually in the crash. So hard to follow.
Right.
I mean, not his fault. If you're on an earnings call and you need to get this stuff out and try and be, succinct.
But again, a PR department would have said, hey, Lars, let's write this out. I'll look over it to make sure it makes sense to me.
Right.
And then when you read it, you can just take your time and it'll all make sense to everybody.
Exactly.
And so this does point to the fact that there probably was a driver in the driver's seat. Obviously, there's more investigation that has to take place, but this is completely contradictory to what all the headlines were, which was no one in driver's seat at the time of crash.
Right. I mean, there was no one in the driver's seat at the time after crash when the car had burnt up. But again, someone could have walked out of the car and run away.
And this is the problem with our press. They want eyeballs. They don't really want the truth. They know that if they don't get a story out right away, that this will get lost and no one will talk about it. So they come out with something bombastic so that everyone will talk about it, even though what you're talking about is not the truth.
So then point 6, all seatbelts post-crash were found to be unbuckled.
Here's Lars.
And all seatbelts post-crash were found to be unbuckled.
So now, again, we're talking about the car that was in the crash. All of the seatbelts were unbuckled.
Right. We don't know if that means they were unbuckled after the crash, like someone got out of the car, or if they were unbuckled the whole time. Now, one point I want to point out is if they were unbuckled the whole time, when you're in a Tesla and the seatbelts are unbuckled and the car is like, okay, now you're doing something, it starts to beep at you. So my question is, if there were 2 or 3 people in the car and they were having fun and stuff, would they want that beep to be beeping the whole time? I don't know. I wouldn't. Would you?
I've grown up in my life. I get in a car and I put on the seatbelt without thinking about it. So, I mean, I've been like, hey, can I wait in your car, to my friends or whatever, and we're not going to drive anywhere. I will get in the car, put on my seatbelt, and my friends are like, we're not going anywhere. And I'm like, oh, so sorry.
Conditioned.
Reflex.
Right.
I think that there are a lot of people in the world who don't put on their seatbelts. So whether or not they put on their seatbelts or not, we don't know. if they didn't have their seatbelts on the whole time, would explain why 2 people died in this collision. It would also point to no autopilot because
can't put it in.
You can't put it in autopilot if the driver isn't buckled.
Right. And then the final point, Lars said they were unable to recover data from the SD card from the time of impact, but local authorities are working on it. Here's what he said.
We were unable to recover the data from the SD card at the time of impact, but the local authorities are working on doing that, and we await their report.
So, did he mean that the NTSB is working on it? Because I highly doubt that a local police force could extract data from like a corrupted SD card.
And this is an important point. Words do matter.
Right.
And so when he said local authorities, did he mean the local NTSB authorities? Did he mean the local police authorities? And again, the PR department, I think, would have said, can you please clarify that?
Right. And it would have been straightened out in the nicely worded document that he would have just been holding up on his phone or nice microphone and reading out.
Because I have my doubts that if it's the local police who are in charge of this data extraction, that they're going to be able to do it very well, because I don't think they have the resources. Whereas the NTSB, they probably do this all the time, and they would have the resources.
And just so we're clear about what they're talking about, somewhere on the MCU of the car is a little SD card, which could have data from the crash event, whether that be Sentry mode footage or whether that just be like logs of like the brake was enabled at this time or the steering was done at this time or autopilot was enabled at this time. It all might be on the SD card. What I'm assuming was, since it was in a horrible fire, is that the electronics of this thing might have gotten a little cooked.
Right.
At least the plastic casing would have got cooked, which means that you couldn't just stick it in an SD card slot. There are ways to recover data amazingly from some things in certain cases.
Well, and there is a black box in the Tesla, and from people I've talked to, they say that black box can withstand quite a lot. Obviously, we can't predict exactly in this fire if it would have survived, but they have survived very bad crashes in the past. So it is possible that there's really good data that somebody has right now.
And the nice part about that is that that data would contain the truth. So that kind of wraps up the confusing answer given by Lars on the earnings call.
And I just want to point out another thing. When Lars was giving his account on the earnings call, where was Elon? Where was Drew? Where was Zac? They could have interrupted at any point, especially during the 30-mile-an-hour crash point, and said, oh, excuse me, Lars, I'm sorry, I didn't follow you on that, or let me clarify on what Lars is saying. Did they? No. And here's why. They're all clear on what happened. And so when they hear Lars talking, it's like, okay, I get it. Are we all clear on what happened? No. Their job was to tell us what happened clearly. And that is the PR department's job.
And it's understandable that Drew and Elon wouldn't be thinking about, like, how are other people perceiving what Lars might be saying, because that's not their job. I mean, Elon really cares about facts. He doesn't necessarily care about how people are perceiving those facts, and especially not in real time. Maybe with a tweet, he could think, oh, couple steps down the line, what will people think of this tweet? Sometimes, maybe. A PR department could go, oh, excuse me, just having someone on the line. Now, PR departments suck, by and large. They are not built for this type of media interaction.
Right.
They are just there to try and get more, marketing, more PR, more publicity.
Right.
Here, Tesla has all the publicity in the world. All they have to do is crash a car, and there's tons of publicity about it.
He could rename it the Clarity Department. In companies that he runs, like SpaceX, he has people like Gwynne Shotwell, who are amazing at their jobs and who know how to translate Elon into regular speak, so that when they go and talk to NASA or talk to a government agency, they can take what he wants and translate it into something that they understand. That's what Tesla needs, and that's why Tesla's stock price, in my opinion, is stuck all the time. When people like Jesse and I are talking about, like, why isn't it going higher? This was an amazing earnings call. It's stuck because the mass media gets to say whatever they want, confuse everybody. All the fund managers and all of the investors are like, well, I guess it wasn't a great call. And they have no one there to rebut it.
And you might be saying, like, Elon's Twitter. Yes, but they don't have to treat Elon's Twitter as a reputable source. They could say, and then Elon said some weird wacko thing that doesn't agree with us. Whereas a official PR department, and I agree, an official PR department statement, to me doesn't mean that much compared to, Elon's Twitter, because I listen to Elon. I'm interested in what he has to say. But for a newspaper, for a online publication, the official PR department, press release is what they're going to have to kind of go by, because that's what the rules are.
I have a solution. Tesla should hire someone like Cathie Wood to be their president, and I mean president of Tesla. Not the PR department, not the marketing department, the president. So that when there's something like this, she can go on shows like, let me give you an example. CNBC, after the earnings call, has Jim Cramer, with no one there to rebut him, talking about how the earnings call was a letdown and the stock price is, of course, going to go down. If sitting there in the middle between him and the other CNBC guy was Cathie Wood, who says, I totally disagree with you, Jim, and here's why, then we would have an honest discussion about what's going on, and we would have a translation of what just happened in the earnings call so that we could all understand Elon's vision. But again, in the absence of nothing, you listen to what's there.
And what's there isn't nothing. I mean, there are a lot of really great people on Twitter who will tweet at Elon a understandable statement.
Right.
Elon will say smiley face or yes or no. And that's wonderful, because Elon isn't so great at, explaining things to people. It's like he has all of these translators online,
right,
who, Elon will put out a tweet, then someone will say, just to clarify, you mean this? And Elon will go, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, because you are doing the job of a PR department.
But the mass media doesn't use these tweets like that. Yes, Electrek and We Do and a bunch of other, people who are into this, but the mass media, they don't follow all the tweets. They wait for a bombastic tweet from him, and then they're like, yeah, let's print that. So what's the problem here? We've got Elon translators all over the place, which is great, but that doesn't mean that the mass media is going to listen to them, which means that the mass public doesn't get the message.
So just hire one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, just pick any one of them and just say, hey, do you want to be our PR representative? I mean, I don't even agree with you about the Cathie Wood being president of Tesla. Keep everything the same. Just hire one of the amazing tweeters, Tesla tweeters, or whatever you want to call them, as just a PR department.
But here's the thing. You need someone with gravitas. You need someone who can really explain things, and you need someone who can stand up to Elon, because Gwynne Shotwell now, she's been working with him for 20 years. She has gravitas. She has his respect. PR departments don't have any respect from Elon. He's going to push them around and tell them to do things that they don't think is a good idea, but they're like, okay, well, the boss told us to do this. And that is the problem at Tesla, is that Elon is so powerful and has such a vision that a lot of the people beneath him are afraid. And when you get afraid, you become corporate. I'm sorry to say it. I really don't want to say it. I love the company, and that's why I'm saying this, is you got to let your people do what they can do best. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, Elon says all the time, if you have a problem, just, email him. I'm not going to email him. If I'm doing my job one day and I see that you're not, I'm not going to be like, you know what, I'm going to email Elon and say that Jesse's not doing his job. And you know why? Because in my experience, we're both going to get fired.
And that's true of any company. I mean, when do you ever email the CEO of the company when you are simply an employee of that company? Very rarely. You have to be in the upper echelon of that company to even think that you could mention any problem to the CEO of the company.
And I agree that it probably works really well with engineers. I think that if you're working on something and you're like, this bolt should be a different bolt, Elon, I'm going to let you know. That probably goes over really well.
Because it's not politics. Right. That's physics. You just say, well, this bolt won't be strong enough. Right. And Elon will go, you're right. I can't disagree with physics. However, if I say, Elon, this isn't the right way to handle this, or Elon, we need to come out with a statement, and he goes, I disagree with you, because there's no physics to back you up on that.
Right.
It's just your opinion. It might be the right move to make, but if Elon disagrees with you, well, then you're going to have a bit of a disagreement.
And to the final point here that Warren Redlich had brought up, which is, if you don't say anything, the story will die. History does not prove that to be true. Did the 420 story die? No. Did the Model 3 ramp debacle story die? No. Do any of these stories die? No, because the media keeps using them as FUD. So your argument that, if we just don't say anything, people forget about it. Well, they don't. You need to put out the right story, and you should put out the right story. In this case of the Tesla crash, why shouldn't we put out the truth of what we know so far? Why should we let all these rumors and innuendos be circling around that somehow the car drove itself into a tree?
Because if this were any other car that got driven into a tree and there's no one in the driver's seat. Do you know the first thing that the responding officer would have done? He would have said, hey, I need some more people down here. We need to manhunt. We need to find out who did this.
Right.
That would be the first thing. But because he goes to the house of the man who died and says, hey, what happened? And it was like, I don't know. The car can drive itself. Oh, all right. Well, that sounds plausible.
Guess it drove itself into a tree.
If it was an Audi, if it was a BMW, if it was a Toyota, the question would not be, oh, I guess the car drove into it. This wouldn't have been picked up anywhere. It would have been, two guys drove a nice car into a tree. Happens every day. We don't talk about it. But what happened? Now we have a Texas representative who thinks that the car drove itself into a tree and wants to find out all the answers about it, which is typically not the thing that you want to have happen if you're a company.
And I hate to prove my point, but here's a tweet that I think sums it up really well. Squawk Square said, until Elon Musk starts acting like a CEO of a $700 billion company and not a Wall Street bets investor, Tesla stock is stuck. He needs to be more commanding on the path of the company and explain how Tesla is going from $700 billion to $1 trillion. He hasn't done that successfully yet. Genius, but distracted. And to prove my point, Elon tweeted at him, sorry, and then tweets a video of LMFAO, sorry for party rocking. I gotta say, this proves our point here. Elon, you may not be interested in the market cap of your company or the stock price, but as the CEO of your company, you have to be. And so this is what's holding you back.
And it's totally fine. I'm not one of these people who thinks that Elon should get off Twitter and he should stop. It's wonderful that he's on Twitter. It's great that he's able to respond to the community and answer questions and be kind of a PR figure, but he shouldn't be the only one. Why is he a one-man squad when it comes to the PR department?
Right.
Why don't you just have this, we are the official PR department. Here is the press release. That is what you really need in times like these. You don't need Elon Musk, wacky billionaire, responded on Twitter saying, blah, 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 blah. We think he's crazy and wacko.
Right.
As opposed to, here was the official statement from the Tesla's PR department.
Because look at the average person out there. If they know anything about this story, what they know is probably wrong. They're walking around now thinking that, oh, these cars are dangerous. And is that what we want the public thinking about this amazing company right now and about this technology that is going to save lives? No. But that's what you've created. And that's the problem, is this was just a random event that happened one night in Texas. It's going to happen over and over and over again. And each time it does, because a Tesla is involved, it's going to get headlines. And if you don't have a PR department ready to react, you're going to keep getting this kind of bad press.
And it would be one thing if you were just an electric car company. But Tesla is not just an electric car company. They are making full self-driving. Do you think that Waymo doesn't have a PR department? Do you think that Cruise Automation doesn't have a really good PR department? Do you remember when that Uber car killed that lady with the bicycle in Arizona? Do you remember that? Did they not have a PR department? No, they did. And is that story something that you remember? Maybe, but just a little bit. It's not this ongoing rumor. They were able to contain it, shut it down. The story is dead and gone now. With Tesla, there's still rumors about some of their other crashes. Why? Because they didn't have a very good PR department at the time, and now they have none.
It goes back to this relationship with journalists. Journalists are people. They're trying, many of them, to put out the right story. But if they have no one to ask questions to, no one to confirm their story with, then where are they going to get their information from?
And if the journalists who are actually trying to get the truth out have to now contend with fuddy journalists who can put out whatever, bullshit they want, that's a problem, because you won't be able to compete if you put out a story that's more truthful. If some other fuddy journalist can put out whatever crazy conspiracy theories with no backlash from a Tesla official department, it's going to change the way the story gets reported across the board.
I mean, this statement from Lars is a perfect example. The news media has to work fast. They had to put out some kind of story because this was breaking news, but they had nowhere to go to get confirmation. They couldn't, tweet at Elon and hope to get a response in time by their deadline? No. So
that's not how it works.
Exactly. So with no press department, they were forced to do what they did. Elon, you forced them to report this crummy reporting, which you said is a travesty. That's because you just won't accept that this is how it works. You need someone at the company that can respond back. And it's your job to hire a good press department. If you're not happy with what you had in the past, I'm sorry. Go find the right people. They've got to be out there. But don't make this excuse that you're going to take on that job. You've already taken on every other job at Tesla practically. How can you possibly now be in charge of press?
And it's not like we hate Tesla. We love the company of Tesla because they are pushing the envelope when it comes to electric vehicles, because electric vehicles are a gateway for a lot of people to get into being green, to be able to say, hey, I can take control of what my car runs on. I don't have to just, I have to go to the gas station. Whatever the nearest one is, that's where, you can put solar on your roof. You can say, oh, I can't put solar on my roof, but I could pay a little bit more to get renewable energy in my car. And then when people are saying, oh, it's a coal-powered car, you can go, up yours. That's not true. Without Tesla, that wouldn't happen. We would still be stuck with the Nissan Leaf with a 90-mile range.
I want to go to Elon's big point that he brings up all the time, that Tesla's mission is to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. If that is true, Elon, if you want to accelerate it, then you need the people's support. And the way to get the people's support is to give them the facts, to give them the truth. And you're not able to do that right now because the media is not working with you. And so if you're not going to have a working press department, you're not going to be accelerating that transition. I'm sorry. And it is because I love your company so much that I'm pushing for you to change what you've been doing, because it's the wrong path. It's not going to work. This is a perfect example of what you're going to keep running into, and this isn't helping anybody.
Because all it takes is one story to get stuck in someone's head, and they will never buy a Tesla until they're the last person on earth buying a Tesla.
Right.
And I wish that was only true of one person on earth. I'm pretty sure that this story is going to set Tesla back months, if not years, because people are going to think that they're unsafe. It would be one thing if it was like maybe kind of true. It's the opposite of the truth. So why would you want to let the press continue to on your company for no reason?
Yeah. I mean, I know that Elon's a smart person. I just don't think that he understands that not everyone works at his speed and that not everyone can understand him. We've been listening to Elon for years. We understand his speech pattern. It is a difficult speech pattern, I've got to be honest. And so when we're listening to an earnings call, we know how to get to the heart of what he's saying. But if you try and listen to it, one of the reasons why so many people said it was a snooze fest is because it takes them a while to get to the point and to get to a point that you can understand if you're not a genius or if you don't listen to it 6 times. And so part of the problems on these earnings calls, apart from the bad audio and everything, is that it's not even clear what he's getting at. How about if you had a press department, you'd sit down before the earnings call, come up with the key points you want to hit, and maybe you don't talk so much, or maybe you just talk about those points. The Investors Relations Department puts out a wonderful investor packet that's full of all the information we need. Maybe what you need to do is just put a couple more points from Elon in there and be done with it. Maybe skip the call. I mean, and that's sad to say because I love the calls. I love hearing from Elon.
And I love that they have set up say.com. I love that they're able to listen to retail investors first before we get to the stuffy analysts who ask the stupid questions.
But all you need to do is have the press department ready so that when reporters are writing their stories after these events, they have somewhere to go to say, this is what I heard Elon say. And the press department can go, nope. That's not what he said. Here's the statement you need to use.
And just to prove our point, all of these answers came from the say.com retail investor question, which asked, don't you think you should have a PR department? Thank you so much for watching this episode of In Depth. We hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the like button. It makes a huge difference if you haven't done that already. And subscribe to the channel. We come out with content every week.
And let us know what you think in the comments below.
We'll see you next week.
Now you know.